You know, even though the Israelites were set free from Egypt, you know, they got out there and they started complaining, didn't they, as soon as they didn't have everything they wanted. Oh, if we could have just been back in Egypt, you know, where we had all our flesh pots and all these things, you know, instead of dying out here in the wilderness, you know. We would have been comfortable back there in Egypt, you know. Well, they were in slavery, you know, but how quickly they forget, you know. So here they become comfortable in captivity. You know, does this speak to us today? Does this speak to us today?
Yep.
Maybe as God's people, we have maybe become comfortable on this earth. We've become comfortable on this earth. That we've sort of settled in on this earth. Have we done that maybe? Because really for God's people, this world has nothing to offer, does it? This world has nothing. We should be those strangers and pilgrims that is talked about in Hebrews 11. In fact, if you can, keep your place there in Daniel 9. I'd like to look at those verses. I gave you the verses on your notes here, but I didn't print them out for you. Hebrews 11. We'll look at a few verses here. I'm going to start with verse 9. Speaking of Abraham, it says, by faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. And then jump to verse 13. Now, chapter 11 has been talking about different men of faith. And so it says here, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from where they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. See, if they had opportunity to return, if they had a change of heart, maybe change of mind, they could have returned. But they didn't have. They had an eye single to the glory of God. They had a vision that they were looking for that home that was builder and maker was God. So they didn't want to return to the old homestead. So, excuse me. So now we have a time for the decree, 457 BC. Remember I said the third decree was given in Ezra's time, and Nehemiah was a contemporary of Ezra. And he is the one who actually built the wall there. So we have a time for the decree. It's 457 BC. And so it says, from that time of that decree, 69 weeks would be the date that the Messiah would come on the scene, that the Messiah would appear. 69 weeks from that date. So did Jesus appear 69 weeks from 457 BC? Now again, if this is literal weeks, 69 weeks is a little over a year. So did he appear a little after 457 BC? No, he didn't, did he? He didn't. So are these weeks really literal years? In Numbers 14, verse 34, and Ezekiel 4:6, you can find this as well. There talks about, and in Numbers 14:34, I'll just share that little scenario. What was going on there is the 12 spies had gone into the land of Canaan. They were spying out the land, and they were going to come back with a report. And the report was that whether, what the land was going to be like. Well, 10 spies came back with an evil report because they said, oh, it's beautiful land, but we can't overtake it. It's too much for us. The people are giants. And so, Thank you. Thank you. I hope that helps. He said it's too much for us. We can't overtake that land. And so God said, well, because you didn't believe and trust that I could take you in there and conquer the land. You were in there for 40 days, so every day you were in there, you're going to spend a year in the wilderness. So it's 40 years for the 40 days you're in the wilderness. So we see that one day in prophetic time equals a year of literal time. Okay? Again, there's that principle brought out in Ezekiel 4:6 as well. So these 70 weeks. So how many days are there in a week? 7, right? 7. So 70 times 7, quick math, is 490. 490. So 490 years would be the time frame here we're looking at for these 70 weeks. He said 490 years or 70 weeks or 490 years are determined upon your people. Okay. It says determined upon your people. That word determined in the Hebrew is cut off. The Hebrew word is shatak. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I'll give you the spelling of it. C-H-A-T-H-A-K. It's in the Hebrew. That's the only time this Hebrew word is found in the Bible at all. Old Testament. The only time it's found at all in the Bible. And so it says 70 weeks are cut off. So cut off from what? Cut off from what? Well, cut off from the original prophecy. Because 490 years obviously doesn't cover the whole, 70 weeks doesn't cover the whole 2,300 days. So this 490 years, 70 weeks is cut off from the original time prophecy of 2,300 days. So in verse 24 it says, 70 weeks are determined upon the people, upon the holy city, to finish transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Okay? You have my verses right up there. So, how could the Jewish nation, how could they finish transgression? How could they make an end of sins? How could they bring reconciliation for iniquity? How could they bring in everlasting righteousness? There's only one way, isn't there? It's through Jesus, isn't it? Only Jesus can put an end to sin. Only Jesus can bring reconciliation for iniquity. Only Jesus can bring in everlasting righteousness. So only Jesus could make this happen. So it's to seal up the vision and the prophecy. You know, to seal up means to confirm or to ratify. To confirm or ratify. So just as the events that we're going to look at here in the 70-week prophecy, just as the events we're going to look at seals up the vision, it confirms or ratifies that the 70 weeks is true, it also is going to confirm and ratify that the 2,300-day prophecy and the events of that are true as well. Okay? So verse 24, it says, anoint the most holy, at the very end of verse 24, and to anoint the most holy. Okay. Now the furniture in the holy place and the most holy place was to be anointed. Before they began the service of the sanctuary, when they first were building the sanctuary, before they actually put it into to service, they were to anoint the holy place and the most holy place, all the furniture in there, okay? And the altar and the laver in the courtyard would be anointed also, prior to the ministration of the priest's work in the sanctuary. Also, Aaron and his sons were to be anointed before they began their priestly ministry as well. Okay? And you can see that in, I've given you the verses there, in Exodus 29 and Exodus 30. There's some verses there to look at that tell you that. So, let me ask you this question. After Jesus returned to his Father following his resurrection, what was his work to consist of? His work was to consist of a high priest, wasn't it? High priest, an intercessor. The priest was an intercessor for the people, wasn't he? He was a high priest and intercessor for us. So, Hebrews 4, Hebrews 2, Hebrews 8, I gave you some verses there, verify that Jesus, in fact there's a number of verses in Hebrews, that verify that Jesus is our high priest in the heavenly sanctuary, interceding for us even right now. So just as Aaron and his sons, before they began their priestly ministry in the earthly sanctuary, as it was dedicated and consecrated, before they began that priestly ministry, they were anointed to the priesthood, weren't they? So as they were, so Jesus, before he began his phase of high priest in the heavenly sanctuary, was anointed before he began that priestly ministry. Because you remember, there's two phases to Jesus' work, right? He's the lamb, the sacrificial lamb, without spot, without blemish. But after that, he is also the priest. So remember, the earthly sanctuary service was all a representation of Jesus' work in behalf of man. The lamb, the high priest.